Hello and welcome to another In Conversation with WLV Doctoral College. I'm Dr. Deborah Kirsten and I work in research and development at the University of Wolverhampton. As you can see, I'm not here with Ben, I'm here with Kirsten, who used to be one of our postgraduate researchers. Kirsten, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, yes, I just very recently finished my PhD, so I handed in November last year, and I received my final confirmation that I've got my PhD about a couple of weeks ago. So there was quite a long period between those two points. I looked at. I was working in the School of Media. I was looking at themes of militarism, masculinity, and visual representation of the war on terror, as it was being called at the time, and sort of taking a critical look at how images of male soldiers were being depicted across a time period of 20 years. Since then, I came from an educational background, and before that I came from a working in television background. So I'd been a director at BBC before I then started working in education, and then did the PhD, and I've since gone back into education and I'm teaching film production at Gloucestershire University.
Wow, what a background, that's fantastic. And a very topical doctorate, given what's going on at the moment.
Very much, yeah, that's quite interesting actually, because when you're sort of a postdoctoral period is a really strange period, because you're completely immersed in your PhD, and you're obsessed with it and you're in love with it and all of those things that people will recognise, and then the doctorate finishes, but the thinking still goes on. And because my PhD was looking at a very sort of topical conversation point, the fact that we're still in a position where, as my doctorate finished, we were in the transition period of withdrawal from Afghanistan, and now the terrible events that have happened in Ukraine are really kind of impacting on the way I'm thinking of the way it's being visually mediated and way people are being represented. It keeps talking to me, and other people, of course, as well.
And this is the beauty of a doctorate, that it just keeps going.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
What you're going to talk to us about today is that experience of Viva. You said that it's been quite a recent event. So could you tell us a little bit about the Viva Voce and how you experienced it?
Yeah, it was really interesting actually. It was not as, it didn't go into as much sort of microscopic detail as I prepared for, so that's something that's worth kind of noting. But what it was very much asking for was that I had a really good understanding of where my research was positioned, what my research was doing, if you like, what function it was serving, but also lots of questions which I found very difficult, and I don't know how successful I was in those terms. Who benefits? Who benefits? Who is it for? How does this, and obviously moving on to the other question, which is how does this then contribute to knowledge? So the Viva was very, very, very enjoyable, I have to say. The other thing that the Viva did was it gave me lots of space to take control, if you like. So there were lots of open questions, and sometimes there weren't any questions at all. There were more kind of things like, well, you might want to talk about, well, what area would you like to talk about now? So I was kind of put in the kind of driving seat quite often, which I wasn't quite prepared for, but I'd sort of advise is quite a good thing to think of, that perhaps it's not the same for everybody, I know, but perhaps your panel might actually want you to actually sort of take control a little bit of the direction that the conversation goes in. The other thing that was really good good to prepare for really was to really prepare those foundational questions, really, you know, exactly as I've said. What is it that your research is doing? Where does it sit within the kind of framework of other research? And then, you know, who benefits and what is the contribution to knowledge? Why is this really important? And I spent a lot of time really thinking about that and having a very clear position on that. And I wasn't so scared to second guess what they wanted me to say, because I think it's another really important thing to be very clear about what it is that you think is important about it as well. It's yours.
You've started to broach on the subject of how you prepared. So what advice would you give other researchers about preparation for Viva Voce?
I think that idea of really having a clear idea of the fundamental foundational questions of who, what, why, where, when and how, and for whom. It was the for whom that I found quite difficult, actually. But and then the other thing I think is to read the thesis, and my thesis was handed in as an e-reader, but then I actually printed it out, and I did kind of write notes in areas where I knew that I was less sure, and to sort of to allow yourself not to know everything, because you can't know everything, but to know what you're less clear about, to know where the spaces are for you to kind of take research further, because it may be that you didn't resolve something, or you didn't quite kind of get to the heart of what it was that you wanted to say. But I understood that that's actually okay, as long as you can identify it and then know that it's something that you can carry on with after the Viva Voce. And I think it was from the Doctoral College, it was actually from you, I think, who said that think of the PhD as a springboard rather than a kind of a vessel, if you like, in which you put all of your knowledge. And I thought that was really good. So all of the things that you don't know are as important as the things that you've got absolutely down. And I identifying that was really important in terms of preparation.
Brilliant, thank you. So you've talked about some of the things that you did for in preparation. Did you have a mock Viva, and how useful was that? Yeah,
I did. I had a mock Viva, and that was very useful, actually. It was very encouraging. I think that was the important thing about that. And within the mock Viva was more of a conversation. I had it with Mac Dalglish in the School of Music. So what we looked at was the idea of practice as research, because mine was a practice as research. And so the mock Viva helped us to shape how the practice would be integrated into the kind of the verbal conversation. So we didn't kind of do it as a formal interview, as if we were in an interview, but we actually broke off and talked and had a conversation, and then Matt would say, well, you might want to think about, and I'd say, yeah, but what about, you know, so if there was a lot more of that kind of thing. Okay, thank you.
So in terms of the Viva Voce, is there any advice that you would give students about the Viva itself? Was there anything that kind of happened that you didn't expect to happen, or anything that you think is useful for other postgraduate researchers to know?
Yeah, I think the thing that I wasn't expecting was the idea that there was lots of space for me to kind of take the initiative in terms of where the Viva goes. So I'd kind of advise for students to second guess that, really, or to think about that it might not be that it's going to be a direct question and answer scenario. I was also I had the Viva in person as well, and I think it was because it was practice led, that was quite important. And so getting into the space and actually sort of preparing the space is a really important thing to do, just being used to being in there and getting your technology right and deciding whether you want anything up on the screen. You can do things like put images up on the screen, or you could put a bit of your thesis up or something like that, which is, I think, is a really good thing to do. And then the other thing was just really that back to the point that I made before, really, is that I think there was lots of space for me to ask questions. There was lots of space for me to say, well, I'm not sure about that, and put it back to the examiners. Well, what do you think about that? And what do you read into that? Because remember, those vivas they really can be helpful in terms of helping you to kind of close off that section of your research, but also to open up new research. So not to be afraid of asking questions.
And I think it's important here that it is a conversation, isn't it? I think lots of people think it's an interrogation, where it is a conversation, and you can ask questions back of your examiners. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice.
That's right. I think the other thing was that if it does suddenly feel a bit, it feels like an interrogation if you become nervous, and I obviously there were points where I became nervous or started to kind of lose my thread, as I'm suddenly doing now. But you can take breaks as well. So allow yourself to take a break, ask for breaks, or maybe talk, because you've got a chairperson. Maybe talk to the chairperson beforehand as well, and sort of talk to them about how to kind of pace it, so that you don't feel, if you do get to a bit where you really feel a bit lost, or you can't quite, there were a couple of questions that I had to ask a few times. What do you mean, or terminology that I wasn't familiar with, and you can take breaks in that case, I think, because the examiners, they're coming from a different perspective, and they may have a different way of viewing the world, or a different way of articulating that you've not been familiar with before. So you sometimes you need to absorb where they're coming from. You need time and space.
I think that's a wonderful tip about, asking for breaks when you need to take breaks, and asking for clarification as well where you need clarification. I think some people think, that I can't do that, and it's perfectly okay too. So that leads me on to my last question. Are there any tips that you'd like to leave for postgraduate researchers about the Viva Voce?
Just try and enjoy it as much as you possibly can. Ask lots of questions. Remember that you don't have to know everything, but be familiar with the areas that you still want to find out more about, and talk about those areas as much as the areas that you're fully confident about. And just remember that it's your work, and they're there to help you, and to consolidate that work, and it's a really important and hopefully enjoyable part of the whole process.
Thank you for your advice, Kirsten. There's lots of wonderful nuggets of gold in there, so thank you for sharing those, and congratulations on being awarded your doctorate.
Thank you very much. It's a great feeling. It's really good.
So thank you everybody for listening. Thank you Kirsten for joining us. As always, if there's any topics you'd like us to cover in these blogs, do please put them in the comments below. We're happy to cover those, and thank you for listening, and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye.
Bye.